Let's revisit the page we created in the previous video. We see that all the paragraphs have been colored as red. Now suppose we want to change the background color of the first and second paragraph from red to green, and at the same time we want the color of third paragraph to stay red. But as we have seen, setting the color using the P element selector in the CSS file applies the color of red to all the paragraphs of that particular HTML document. So how should we go about it? How can we change the color of just the first two paragraphs and not third? Any idea? The intuitive way of thinking would lead us to say that there should be some sort of indicator that differentiates first two paragraphs from the third. And the way of differentiating the first and second paragraph from the third is the phenomena called the class selector. In the CSS file, we will define a class with the name of, say, paragraph-style, and then inside the curly braces we'll set the background property to blue. Having done that, we shall now move to the HTML file, and here in the first and second paragraph's opening tags we shall write class =, then quote-unquote paragraph-style. This will apply whatever style we have set inside the paragraph style class. And before we see the result in the browser, there's one more thing to be done, and that is when we define a class inside a CSS file, the class definition begins with a period followed by the class name. This period is an indicator that this is the class definition inside the CSS file. Now that we are done, save the files and load into the browser. And we can see that our first two paragraphs have now the color blue. But there's one more thing to be noted, and that is inside the CSS file, the declaration that applies the color of red to all the paragraphs is still there. And what actually happens in the background is that the color of red is applied to all the paragraphs first, but then the browser sees that, oh, there is a class declaration that wants the color of paragraphs to be updated. The browser then updates the color from red to blue. The declaration that is done with the name of an element is called the element selector. Such as the declaration of paragraph that we are watching on the screen right now is an example of the element selector. And the class selector has precedence over the element selector. Therefore, the color of red has been overridden by the green color. It's important to note that the name of class can be anything, but it's a better idea to give a descriptive name so that it's easier for us to read the code. Now, suppose we want to change the color of third paragraph from red to blue. This would require us to create another CSS another class. This would require us to create another class, and in that class we'll set the background color to blue. But when we have to apply style to just one element on an HTML file, CSS allows us to create a very specific selector that can only be used just one in the entire HTML document, and that is the ID selector. The ID selector begins with a £sign followed by the name of our choice, and then inside the curly braces we set the property value pair. After that, inside the HTML file, we apply the ID inside the opening tag of the element, and that's it. So let's write the ID selector for the third paragraph by giving it a name of third-para and setting the color to green. Background color green, semicolon. Now let's get inside the HTML file. Give the ID to the third paragraph of third dash para, save and reload the browser, and here we go. So to sum it up, the element selector is applied to all the elements on an HTML file. The class selector is applied to more than one elements of an HTML file, and the ID selector is applied to just one element of an HTML file. And this sums up our brief introduction of different types of selectors that CSS has to offer us. Thanks for watching.